Hello and welcome everyone to the ProgCast. I'm your host, Gregg Bendian. I'm here each week talking with creative musicians about all of their really interesting projects and their thoughts about the creative process. And today I'm joined by an old friend and collaborator, Tom Chiu. He's a violinist and a composer. He leads the Flux Quartet, which has been active now for many years, premiering and commissioning works by incredibly interesting modern composers. Tom and I worked with Ornette Coleman together after I had collaborated with Flux Quartet on a piece of mine called Alloy. And I'm so happy to have him here to chat with him about his life and his music. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Greg. Great to be with you.
So happy to see you again. The last time Tom and I saw each other was at Princeton University right before the pandemic started, and he was performing the wonderful piano and string quartet piece by Morton Feldman with the wonderful pianist from Los Angeles, Vicky Ray, who has also been a guest on this program. And Tom, that was such an interesting experience, being in an audience for a rare performance, I think, of that Feldman piece. It's about an 80-minute piece.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I want to talk to you about the longer Feldman pieces, but the 80-minute piece really was an amazing thing to experience live because I knew the piece, I enjoyed the piece, loved the piece, loved to get into all the later variations that occur by the end. It's such a big payoff in a way.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about those performances? You did it a few times with Vicky, right?
We did it twice, yeah. We did it twice. Well, Vicky is such a great pianist, particularly for that type of music. She has such a, it's a very meditative music, right? And she just has like the perfect energy for it. And we loved working with her. We thought the performances were great. It just, you can't. Sometimes music has different music has different moods that goes along with it, right? And you often can't force the mood, and so. When someone like Vicky, she just sort of, I guess a big part of that mood is like part of her artistry. So it just becomes, so the mood just like just organically emerges. And I think that's what was really special about those performances.
I think it is a wonderful quality of Feldman's music that it is so meditative and introspective. He was so fond of quiet sounds, but that I feel is really part of his genius because it pulls you in a way.
Yeah, if you analyze, if you put on like a music theorist hat and you analyze the content of his chords and his pitch choices is actually extremely, a broad word I could use is complicated, but it's just very actually, it's very like 20th century European chromaticism. However, he slows it down. So you could hear those sonorities. I don't know. That was, let's just say that was just one great. He's a master of other tricks, but that was one great trick that he had, and really works for his music.
That's a really good point. Those sonorities, those dissonances, those musical entities would be flying past you.
Right.
In a Schoenberg piece, or
exactly,
in a Warren piece, or what have you, but he gives you this sense of savoring the sonority.
Right. And so all of a sudden, what is dissonant actually sounds consonant because you're just lingering there for a while. You start to get used to it.
Isn't that interesting? Because repetition and familiarity takes away a certain quality of a dissonance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, consonance and dissonance is such a huge concept throughout the music that we've been dealing with our whole life, right? And from before our lives. But I found it interesting that when I was working with Cecil Taylor, and he was playing these really dissonant cluster piano runs, when he would go into a major seventh chord or into some sort of what would be considered consonant sonority, he had flipped it, and all of a sudden consonant sounded dissonant to me. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Right? Because in a way, dissonance is like, oh, this doesn't fit with my picture of, consonance, so it's dissonant, it's going against. And then here he had been working in all these dissonant sounds, and then he went consonant, and I thought, that doesn't fit.
I know what you mean, because when we're talking, when talking about this, we're talking about like either point of stability or point of instability, right? So if the norm, like what you're saying about Cecil, if the base language is the dissonant language, then all of a sudden the consonance becomes like a point of instability.
I like making it, but that idea that you just served us, which is the overall kind of palette or the overall sound world. We know what's within it and what's without of it, and what's outside of it.
Outside, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that goes beyond consonance and dissonance too, right? I mean, it's loud and soft. It's all these different contrasting and opposite kinds of qualities.
Yeah.
I always also felt like Feldman, I think I said this to Vicky too, like Feldman for me is almost like a prolongation of Webern.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you took any of those little moments, those little collections of notes that Webern will move through and just and looped it for 30 seconds, then that's sort of it's pre-designating kind of an area that Feldman would then linger on.
Right.
And there's something else that I wanted to ask you about that concert in Princeton. You also played the first Stravinsky string quartet.
Yes.
I guess for people who haven't heard it, it eerily kind of predates the sound world of the string quartet work with Feldman.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And David Lang was curating that concert, and was that at that concert? And I spoke with him a little bit, and he felt very strongly that the Stravinsky kind of got involved with the Feldman world, but then he left it. He wasn't interested in continuing that kind of sound world, was he?
I don't. That's neither here or there for me. Okay. I think. Well, I mean, Stravinsky predates Feldman, so it's a little awkward to talk about. Right, it's a little backwards too.
Well, that's true, but I guess what I mean is, how did you feel presenting those two pieces together, and how they felt as a duo program?
I mean, I see there are definitely big sections of the Stravinsky piece that has minimalistic tendencies, repetitious tendencies. So yeah, I think that's kind of what you're talking about. There's definitely that connection. David was just he was just interested in juxtaposing one very short piece against a very long piece. So it's I think in the sense that I think it's fun to have like tiny appetizer in front of like a, you know, very big main course, steak dinner, what have you.
Yeah, that was interesting. The
Yeah.
Stravinsky's come in at about like 4 minutes.
For maybe 5 minutes with there are 3 movements, so my 5 minutes with the breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because by the time we got to about 45 minutes of the Feldman, people were not hanging.
I guess, you know what, I want to add something else now that I think about it more. One other real overlap between those two pieces, and let's just say that piece of Stravinsky with Feldman's work is there is a sense of non-development. You know, it's a little bit, it's like with it's a little bit, it's like the pieces, the Stravinsky pieces, it's like the first pieces is like a one idea piece, you know, and I think the third piece is also very much a one idea piece. The second piece is a little more complicated. And going back to your relating Webern with Feldman, and and there's total connection. And if you ask musicologists, you know, 95 out of 100 would agree, right? You know, but I think, again, the development of material is a little different. Where Webern's progression of material, I think, retains, you know, Western European music. But Feldman, in that sense, Feldman, let's just say, is actually very American. You know, his pieces, it's really section by section. And I mean, there is some crazy logic when he goes from one section to the next section, but the sections are enclosed. It isn't, you know, it's not like Beethoven, where Beethoven will take the motif from this section and work on it, and then that goes to section 2 or whatever, you know, where there's like a connection and link. I mean, Feldman, structurally it's modular, you know.
Always?
A lot of times.
So an event that takes place in, you know, minute 65 is not going to be related to an event in a Feldman piece that takes place in the first 7 minutes?
No, that's not what I'm saying. That does happen. But what I'm saying is the what's happening in minute 7, and let's say, you know, let's just say minute 10 or minute 12 is different music. It's not like the music in minute 7 evolves into the next section of music. It kind of just sort of jumps to the next section of music.
So do you think that that's going on a micro level? Is he doing every section being block form, boom, stop, boom, go to the next thing?
Well, you know, it's very well known that his composition, this aspect of his composition process is very well known, that he wrote like a single page. Like for, I mean, I know eventually you're gonna probably ask me about String Quartet No. 2. String Quartet No. 2, every page of the score is 3 systems of music, each system with 9 measures. And every page is that, and he's always just composing that page of music. And I mean, some sections is, you know, gonna be 2 of those pages, but he's thinking about the page, and he doesn't. When he's done, he's done. And another fun thing, like you were saying, something that happens in 60-something minutes, 65 minute mark versus 7-minute mark. That does happen. In this 60, we're talking hypothetical, right? So let's say, the 65th minute, it's a recurrence of the material from the 7th minute, but he doesn't he doesn't cut and paste. He writes again, but he writes from memory. So sometimes there'll be one measure that he remembers incorrectly. So it's just like, whoa, but that's just actually what happens.
So that creates variation.
It's not a mistake. It's just, it's a Feldmanism.
So to what degree were you really researching his compositional process when you were going to prepare to play these pieces? Any interest?
Well, in the sense that my first exposure and Flux's first exposure to him was String Quartet No.2, kind of like the mother of all Feldman pieces. And that was back in '99. So look, it's been 22 years. And obviously, my understanding of Feldman has vastly grown and expanded. So now, I mean, even just my experience with String Quartet 2, we, I think, performed it worldwide probably 17 times, something like that. And each time it comes up again, that's the 5.5 hour to 6 hour piece. And each time it comes up again, it's just one further step of understanding, like, what this crazy genius was thinking.
Can you share any insights into his music that you think maybe people would be interested in or surprised by?
We always joked that he has this a slightly evil and sadistic sense of humor, because he's always, a lot of times his intervals are sevenths and ninths. Okay, just below an octave or just above an octave, but smaller or larger than an octave. And he would also spell the notes. And I mean, I don't know if you need to explain to the listeners, but like a simple C could be spelled as a B sharp or a D double flat. and it could be like what I was saying before, he composed pages, right? So there could be 2 full pages of just 2 notes. Okay? I mean, 2 pitches, but constantly spelled differently.
So, but I had someone tell me, maybe it was Vicky Ray, that he meant that he thought that the tuning of a B sharp was different than the tuning of a C natural.
Yes, there are some discussions out there about that. I also have read, some things he's said from his interviews. My opinion is it's not really that conclusive. But what I feel is, quote, microtonal about his music is, and this especially applies to his long duration pieces, is that and I can't speak for all instruments, but I'll speak to string instruments, which is what I play. After X number of hours of continuous playing, the strings, our instruments go out of tune, and so we have to keep playing, and we have to keep. Now, if we're playing stop notes in which our left hand puts the finger down, I mean, we could adjust and put it in the right place, but so much of his music has harmonics. So basically, you get to like the second half of his piece, of these long pieces, or even the last third or the last quarter, and things just naturally start sounding microtonal. So I would definitely embrace that as something, let's just say, I think it's a phenomenon he didn't shy away from. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, this is a process, you know. This is going over long duration, and the actual, let's just say, wear and tear and decay of the tools that we're using. That's part of the process. and that becomes part of the music.
Okay, but this begs the question, because I definitely want to talk about this idea of long duration pieces, right? Having been involved in some long duration music, never 6 hours, but does that become part of the recorded process, or are you in the studio trying to use the studio to record the piece in sections and tune up between sections to keep it sort of a certain way, or were you memorializing that transformation of sound over the course of 6 hours?
I would say we didn't. I mean, we made one recording, right? And no, we did not. What I just talked about, the natural decay during a performance, we didn't apply that to the recording. So we go from one section to section during the recording. We tune back up. Yeah. So.
Well, do you think that Feldman, did he ever speak about that erosion of pitch over the course of a piece?
I personally haven't come across that, but I'm happy to read more of his own writings or interviews to get to that. Back to earlier when I was saying there would be, let's say, 2 pages of music with 2 pitches that kept being spelled differently. It just, I mean, from a rational perspective, this is music that's repetitious. So it didn't, I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense that you try to make the pitches different. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because that screws up the repetition. And also, in this type of material that I'm describing, he changes the duration of notes. Like that's how he creates this weird haze, because it would be like da 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 da. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think the parameter that's changing is duration. So why would you want to also change pitch? So I don't really think that's what's going on.
So he was messing with
my opinion, a little bit, yeah. But it was also like to make, he was really interested in making the players of his music have a certain focus to the pitch that they're playing. So I mean, yeah, we could say he's messing with you, but you could also say he's forcing you to be focused.
I like that. How does one prepare to perform a 6-hour piece by Morton Feldman?
You just go out there and do it.
Really?
I'm kidding. The very first time, it was months and months of preparation, and also the very first time we had let's just call this a dress rehearsal, but we did a we booked do you know the local New York City area, the best radio station in the world, WFMU, freeform radio. And we were fortunate to, and it's a it's one of my most happy places talking about that radio station. But we were fortunate. There was just out of you know how just music lovers are just naturally going to find each other and bond, right? So when I discovered the station shortly after I moved to New York, in my early to mid 20s. I started just developing some friendships at the station. So there was one DJ, his name is, his radio name was Kenny G. And we were able, his real full name, Kenneth Goldsmith. We were able to, he was so generous to, I proposed this to him and he was so generous. He was like, oh yeah. I asked him if we could, on one of his 3-hour shows, like just a few days, it might have been, half a week or 5 days before the actual performance. We said, okay, during your 3-hour show, can we just play 3 hours of this piece? And so that was our dress rehearsal on a specific radio show on WFMU. And that was great. That really prepped us for, oh, this is what it feels like.
How do you prepare your body to go on stage to do that? I mean, without being able to take a bathroom break or have any nutrition, is it just become like a physical meditation? Now over 20 years later and doing this 16, 17 times, I could tell, yeah, it's a little bit, it's just it's like mind over matter. And I think one could be simplistic and say, oh, it's like a challenge of completing a task. Right, but it's more than that. Because the task is such a beautiful and such a rewarding one. Like the thing, it's very hard, yes, to go through that 5.5+ hours. But what we're playing is so much of it is such beautiful music that we want to get to the finish line. We don't want to fail. We don't want to quit in the middle. We want to get to the finish line. I said that, over, some 20 years later, I could tell you it's mind over matter. But the first few performances, we didn't really have an answer for what you asked about how to prepare for not going to the bathroom or how to, or nutrition. I think initially we worried a lot about our bladder, but after a few experiences, after a few experiences, we tweaked it. We started to learn. Oh wow, you do need like a high degree of energy to be able to get to the end. So people have slightly different ways to deal with it because we have slightly different physical metabolisms. But for me, it turned out to like eating a really nice, like high protein big meal about 2.5 hours before playing. And then at that point also that's also the end of liquids. And then just let your body settle and stuff. And that gets me to the end. And maybe don't drink a bunch of coffee right before you go on.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's obviously a lot of other stuff I want to talk to you about, but before we go onto another topic, what is the importance of Feldman's music for you?
Um, I referred to this earlier. There is this undeniable beauty to it. But I also like. I'm really. This is on so many levels. And this was one of his goals, and I think this is something of interest to me as an artist in the larger sense of so let's say beyond musician, but of creating art, is Feldman went to these long duration forms because he wanted to break out of an expected duration of concert pieces. Like he felt, he goes to Carnegie Hall or wherever, and he sits down and he's like, oh, that piece is going to be 30 minutes or something, And so this was his way of breaking like that kind of predicted preconception you get even before you get to the concert hall. In that I often describe this long piece as a sound installation with live musicians, which in effect it's I feel like that is what it comes off to be. The feeling of the music, yeah, it sounds like these spotty sounds you would hear at a gallery space or something, and when we present the piece, we always make a point. People who come to experience the piece, they're different. There are probably 3 different types of people, but there's a core part of them. They know exactly what they're in for, But we still make a point to say, yeah, enjoy it as you wish. We can't go to the bathroom, but you could go to the bathroom, So again, in that, it is also like, whether it's a gallery or a museum space, it's a little bit like walking around, and you're listening to sound art. That's what's happening, and that part of it is very interesting to me because we as musicians, we need to bring what we do to new audiences, and that's and to go to other art audiences is one really great way to great direction to go in.
Yeah, in fact, you mentioned other audiences, and Feldman was part of a New York scene where he was very interested in painting,
exactly,
and visual arts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, plus what you're mentioning about an environmental musical experience,
yes,
is fascinating. And when Flux performed the second string quartet at Union, was it
Cooper Union?
Union. I was there, and I did a couple hours, and I went out and I had something to eat, and I came back in about 45 minutes, and I loved that experience because the piece had changed by the time I got back. Obviously it's going to change. But I also had an experience of like, that organism has been living in that room.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I felt as though, well, that's living its life over there, and my life took me outside to get a bite, and now I'm back in. Oh, it's still alive. It's still behaving.
Right. Yeah, right.
Amazing. And you guys, are quite amazing for having tackled that and making that experience happen, because that doesn't happen a lot, and those pieces don't get played a lot for a reason. One other thing that came to mind is there's a very brief film of Elliott Carter and Morton Feldman talking about long pieces.
Mm.
In Buffalo in like the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And Feldman says, we don't need any more 20-minute pieces. We need a piece that's going to be at least 2 hours, going to be more than 2 hours. And Elliott Carter says, who do you mean by we? Right? And he said, I don't know if we need a 2-hour piece that nobody's going to play. You know, I mean, it's just, that's a great nexus of realities. Well, he's taking off. He's going his own way. Arguably, no one else was really going to go that way. But Carter had this whole other way of viewing it, almost as like a utilitarian agreement with the 20-minute piece or the 30-minute piece. And Feldman has already broken away, and he's like, no, that's not how I want to experience music. And the other Feldman quote I love is someone asked him, did you go to the concert by the Group for Contemporary Music last night, Morton? And he said, no, but I can tell you the music was either too fast or too loud. Tom, I'm really happy to talk with you today. And one of the things that I wanted to get into is you're very much like me in that you're fascinated with the work of jazz artists and avant-garde, forward-looking African-American composers and improvisers. So just to name a few, Henry Threadgill, Wadada Leo Smith, Muhal Richard Abrams, Oliver Lake, Leroy Jenkins. These are guys that I came up interested in. In fact, I studied drums with Threadgill's drummer from Air, Steve McCall. So I was very interested in Henry Threadgill from back in high school. So when did that whole thing start for you? And did that start with working with Ornette, or was that something that's just always been in your field of interest?
I would say it did. I would say it did start with working with Ornette, or shall I say, working with Ornette opened like a universe to me. I would also say around the time I met Ornette, this was in the mid-90s, I think 96 or 95, I started to, just on my own personal exploration, become a fan of that genre of music. I guess the timing was fortuitous, you know, and then working with the legend like that, it just sort of bumped me up to like a much higher level of, shall we say, voracious appetite for it. And then, yeah, I feel very fortunate that being the stepping stone led me to other of these artists you talk about. You know, it's almost like it's a Venn diagram of of really great of experimental and free jazz. The greatest thing about that whole community of creative artists is they all have their own independent approaches of doing things, and they all have so much respect for other like-minded musicians. It's a community that's extremely warm and supportive. You don't find that in many communities, and it really is. And they're all artists because they're doing their own thing, you know. I mean, that said, they're probably also always, artists, you do your own thing, but you're also always learning, right, and kind of expanding. I mean, you know, you take from other places so that you can expand what you're doing, right? And I just, you know, I have to go back. Yeah, just to go back to just the warmth and the mutual respect of like everybody I've met in that community just makes like creating music so rewarding.
Yeah.
You know, with those great musicians.
I had the same experience. It's also was remarkable to me, like say in high school when I started listening to, you know, Air and Wadada and World Saxophone Quartet and Julius Hemphill, Muhal, Oliver Lake's projects. I noticed pretty early, and this would be in the 70s, so I was still in high school, they're really interested in classical music. And that
Right.
they were influenced by the ideas of Stockhausen, and they were influenced by the ideas of Schoenberg and the European school. And I thought that that was so cool because those guys are going to be influenced differently than, say, the guys we were talking about, Feldman or Carter or Warren. And and so they were going to bring improvisation to it, and they were going to bring really their own personalities to it. And that was the lesson, the object lesson for me as a young composer was, oh, you better come up with your own way of mixing and matching.
Yeah, right.
That's the object. The idea is to come up with your own way of coping with 12-tone and serialism and free improvisation and modular forms and
it's so different from my experiences in the quote classical world, because in the classical world the education is often way too much master apprentice, you know, imitate what I'm doing. Yeah, it's not, it's almost never what you just described, you know, find your own way. But and that is that specific thing is also was and has always been very appealing to me. Yeah,
I think it might also be uniquely American because it's you know, it's not as a European approach.
Right. I agree. And you know, this goes back to goes back to Charlie Parker, right? He was really interested in the classical music of his time. I mean, like really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stravinsky, yeah.
Yeah, Bartok.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I guess it wouldn't surprise you to know that Cecil Taylor was a huge Stravinsky and Bartok guy. Right. And you know, when you're hanging with those guys and they're learning from classical music, you know, they're checking it out. They're saying, what can I do with this? You know, like Cecil's favorite Stravinsky piece was Agon. You know, it wasn't like one of the hits, you know. And those guys were, you know, they're real models of self-education. And, you know, finding what you find interesting and working with that. And I know you guys recorded with Oliver Lake, and you've been working with him on and off for some years, right?
Yeah, almost 20 years.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because he's such an interesting figure.
Yeah, Oliver's great. And you know, we've played. He has like, I think he has enough string quartet pieces for like two full programs. And you know, and also, I would say, they're a little bit flexible. Like they could be done just string quartet alone, or if it's a gig that he gets, whatever, he could you know, he could put a part on top of the piece, you know. So you know, it's a little bit either or. Some pieces are more specific, but a lot of the pieces are like that. And I also have done dual stuff with Oliver, and then he's also done like larger scale. I guess we could say either mixed media or interdisciplinary works where he like collaborates with poets or spoken word and we've done, and this might be a larger ensemble of musicians, but we've done pieces like that. And we actually have an upcoming nice big project with Oliver at the Library of Congress, actually postponed because of COVID-19, but it's going to we're completing this project sometime in the next couple months, and it's going to be remotely broadcasted on the Library of Congress's website. I had actually about that I had an interesting conversation with Oliver recently on that project. There's one of which we have two programs, and one is like an experimental jazz centric program, and the other is a little more of a contemporary hardcore contemporary music program. And on the experimental jazz program, we have 3 pieces by Oliver, and one is a violin piano duo that I had not previously played. So I had, and it's about let's say, I don't know, 65 to 70% notated, and then maybe 30% open. And I just had a conversation with him about the open section, about the improvised sections. And his again, I think this answer is so reflective of the artists that are working in this community. He's like, you bring to the improvisation what you bring to it. Like, it's not like, I mean, the improvised sections come from like a section of written music. So, we're going to naturally probably use material from that. But other than that, yeah, it's like like what he said, you bring to it what you bring to it. There's just this sense of, there's this really welcoming sense that, yes, you can do it. And like, don't think that you're lacking, this type of experience or that type of experience or whatever, or, don't have the bebop chops or whatever, what have you, It's just like, throw yourself in the deep end and just own it. and just like, and you know what, and just express yourself. I think that's another thing I love about I know I keep talking about this community broadly, but I think it really makes sense to talk about it broadly. They're really about expression. Their music, and it's about personal expression. And I know often, I think sometimes people who are more comfortable like dealing with pitches and durations and things like that, they might be a little bit perplexed about just hearing just this force of sound, but that's what it is. It's just expression, and it's very human. It comes from somewhere very deep and very personal. And I love that about a lot of I love that aspect of what a lot of these artists do.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Because I have very vivid memories of when I first started working with Cecil, knowing, well, he wants me to bring contemporary classical percussion influences. He's not against that. He's not looking for me to be a free jazz drummer. Obviously, a lot of other people were, because they thought, what is this guy, trying to put preparations on the cymbals and the drums and try to create all this percussion ensemble stuff. But Cecil was fine with it. Also, remember when we were working with Ornette, probably the first rehearsal, he came over to me. I was playing timpani in the ensemble. He came over to me. He put the music down on my stand. He looked at me. He looked at the music, and he looked at me, and he said, "I don't want you to play any of this. I want you to do your own thing." And that was unbelievable because the music was right there, and it was all bum ba dum bum 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 bum. It really was. It was very straight and kind of like a march. And I thought, this doesn't look like Ornette's music at all. Like, this wouldn't be my concept of Ornette's music. And he literally said to me, "I don't want you to do any of what's on the page. I want you to do your own thing." It's very liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to, there was a bass player on the ensemble, as you will recall.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I'm going to be the second bass. You know, Ornette likes to have second bass players.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'll be the second bass player on timpani.
Right.
So I'm going to be changing pitches. I'm going to be moving, you know, rhythmically in tandem with the bass player, or at least aware of what the bass player was doing. So a lot of that was, again, all of my thought process. I didn't check in with Ornette about that. I just thought, you know, I can do what I want. Oh, I have some ideas.
Right. Yeah.
How did you meet Ornette?
Well, that first, were we talking about that recording project?
Yeah. No, I mean, when you said
you came on for that concert, right?
I did the concert and the recording. Yeah.
And the recording.
Yeah, it was a piece called "The Statue," which was
yeah, I understand.
It was, well, I think people might know it. It's a piece for the Statue of Liberty commemoration called "The Statue." We weren't premiering it. I think it had been performed before, right?
Oh, you know, now you know what? Now, wait, you know, apologies. It's a little while ago. So actually, you know, the recording was actually done twice.
Right.
So yeah, the right. What you're talking, because we were recording things. I mean, everything was being recorded.
The rehearsals were
in the rehearsals leading up to the concert. Yeah. So actually, about 4 or 5 years prior to that, there was actually attempt number one of recording that piece with the Juilliard group. And I was part of that group. I was actually the concertmaster of that group, and that's how that was my introduction to Ornette.
So how did he feel about dealing with the Juilliard musicians?
I will just say that you know, our rendition of it was, let's just say that the Juilliard sessions were much more by the books, or you know, much more like follow the page.
Yeah.
and a lot less have a lot less room for experimenting and trying different things out.
Yeah, I remember those rehearsals very well. Lou Soloff was the trumpet player on it. That was great.
That's right.
And I also remember Ornette talking to the musicians, and a lot of them were classical players that I think you had organized.
Right. I contracted. I put together the group.
Yeah, because you brought me onto it, and and I remember Ornette saying things to them like, "Well, you know, the fifth is the same as the seventh," right?
Yeah.
And how they would have to just deal with that and just scratch their heads and say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What did you feel about Ornette's linguistic thing? Like, how did you deal with the things that he said that I think were always a borderline poetry more than they were actual statements?
I think I know what you're asking. I just think when you know he is the ultimate like person with the biggest ideas. So when he does, you could say that what he's saying is how should I say, like, you know, ambiguous or unclear or what have you, you know. But another really, I mean, I think the way I took it is like, hey, just think outside the box, you know, or think, not even think, think like, you know, like think way beyond the box, you know. And you know, like let's bring this over to, let's say, just say in the context of traditional classical music. Like, how many times people say, hey, you got to lift the notes off the page, you know. There's a huge difference. I know in classical music, the connection between what's on the page and what you play is going to be like 98, 99%, you know. I mean, you know, it's like, it's, you know, it's a certain type of theater where you just have to follow the script, right? You know. But that said, even if you're, you know, you have to follow the page 98, 99%, there's still a huge difference between playing the notes and playing what you feel about the notes. That's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
And in that way, this concept of lifting things off the page or thinking beyond the box is the same. You have to go beyond either the box or the page, you know? And so I think the things were on the surface that sounded cryptic from Ornette is his way of, you know, saying, yeah, think big, you know. think, you know, think way beyond the box.
That's a really great perspective on it. Yeah, the whole tradition of each of those gentlemen really bringing their own persona and their own approach and their own amalgam of different musical worlds, right? I mean, and Ornette is unique in that I believe he's one of the first guys to start trying to write classical stuff and embracing classical players, the Poets and Writers early chamber piece, the Skies of America. Obviously, a lot of people will know of Ornette orchestral stuff, and I think that he's an innovator in that way because not a lot of guys even had the opportunity, much less the ideas for it.
Yeah.
So in many ways, like he makes way for guys like Muhal and Wadada and Henry Threadgill to breach that moat and make it over into bringing some influence into the classical world. I remember the Kronos Quartet starting to play music by what I call the Chicago guys like Muhal and Wadada and Braxton. And I thought, well, this is a natural. You know, I've been listening to Braxton approach classical music. I've been listening to all these guys approach the idea of classical jazz or chamber jazz or improvisation, composition, that whole nexus. And I think that was very inspiring to me as a person who's saying, do I want to be a jazz guy? Do I want to be a classical guy? Do I really want to sit in the back of an orchestra and go ding on a triangle, you know, or do I want to somehow be more involved personally? Because you touch on a great point, the personality, the expression, the personal expression is such a huge part of that. So did you have a similar experience working with Henry Threadgill and Muhal and Wadada, these guys that I've been mentioning?
You know, like they're all a little bit different. I think Henry Threadgill is more cerebral. You know, he has this really complicated looping technique that you know, very complex mixed meter rhythms, very long loops. but he actually, like, when I worked with him, it was we spent a lot of time like in that loop, in that, another word to say, maybe in that groove, a bit of an asymmetric groove. And I'm getting a little bit. Let's just put it this way: that Threadgill is more systematic, and that's how, and that's also how he works with his group and other musicians and his pieces. What Dada has, what Dada has some very, very interesting graphic notation. Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of times a lot of times what you're playing is very much shapes and figures, and then you know, they all have their unique way of repeating material, and they all have their own unique way of how to represent that on the page. and then the last person, this was really the last like couple years of Muhal's life. I was actually so fortunate to work really deeply with him on a trio piece, and this was his composition. There are 3 pages of music written out. They represented, I think, 3 or 4 sections of music, and the trio was me on violin. The cellist was a good friend, a friend and colleague of Megan Burke. And it was Muhal on piano himself. So this is we played together. It was really, really special. And we just, like, every time we played, I mean, you know, there's the written music, and then he would just structure it, you know, if the written music was like A, B, C, and D, and then he would just throw in open places, you know, open sections, improvised sections. And that's what we did. And it was, I mean, that was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, like doing, and we did 3 performances of that.
Was that recorded?
Very, very sad. He really left us too early. Yeah.
Was that recorded, Tom?
I think one of the concerts might have a live recording. So you know what, I need to, I will want to do a little digging about that. Yeah.
You know, talking about these gentlemen, it interests me to know, like, to what degree have you been influenced by them as a composer, as a musician?
I think their work has really influenced what I do as an improviser. And so I think, so as such, it's really influenced, it's really expanded my improvisational vocabulary. And you know how it is with improvising. You're always interacting with who you're improvising with, right? So it's like, you know, there's this like give and take thing, right? And you're gonna react to whoever also is in the sonic space, and you just you take things, you develop things, you sometimes make choices to maybe either go with or go against what's happening, things like that. but definitely, I'm very thankful. I think the breadth of the work I've done with those type of people have really added to my own vocabulary.
As a composer?
So, and actually, that's the next step. And, you know, one thing tricky with composing is especially, one doesn't usually give, it's hard, it's not really, you can't really compose improvisations, right? You know what I mean? I mean, you could write some instructions, play in the style of blah, 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 right? Things like that. But obviously the act of composition is to codify something, right? To put it down. And no, there is one, like, let's say, technique or one part of my vocabulary that I actually did isolate and codify, and I turned that into like I will have to say a very a piece I'm very happy with for the Flux Quartet, and I wrote that in 2015. That's the title of that piece is RETROCON, and that was it's a 20-minute piece, and it's if you'd like me to describe it, it's a piece that is my comprehensive exploration of string arpeggiation, and I'm happy to say that I'm working on on a solo album. It's almost near completion. It'll probably be coming out. It'll definitely be coming out in the spring. I'm gonna say maybe May or June. And this piece is one of the 6 pieces on the album, the RETROCON.
Now, people, I wanted to mention to people that RETROCON is on YouTube. If you want to see the Flux Quartet play this piece, it's a really invigorating, exciting piece with a lot of sawing away. I know I was going to ask Tom about that because there's all these quadruple stops of arpeggiating through all 4 strings with the bow. And when you get that going with 4 guys, it does not sound like 4 guys anymore.
Well, thank you. That's part of the, that was part of my intent is, you got 4 guys, they're all doing 4 strings. It's basically like 16 guys.
It's 16 guys, yeah.
Yeah. But that piece is, and if you guys check that out on YouTube, that piece for me is all about exploring sonorities. That's what's going on in that piece. And like I was saying, that the way I was exploring that approach to my instrument is something that came out of the improvisation context. And I think you might understand this is one of the hardest things for a string instrument is to make the instrument chordal.
Polyphonic.
Yeah, polyphonic, play chords. And that is one way I've been able to bring that into my language.
You also work with more ambient kind of stuff, sound design stuff. Is that true?
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm curious about that part of your musicality. What have you done in terms of sound design?
I often again this comes out of the context of improvisation. I would be improvising with electronic musicians, and that definitely, a couple things happen. In those situations, I often work with a couple effect pedals.
With a pickup?
Yeah, on a pickup. but more and sometimes I do some looping. But I think even more than that, that's where I really I'm someone who's really had a really widely explored extended techniques on my instrument, and insofar as to explore it, so I could increase my instrument's sonic palette. So really sort of taking it out of like a 18th century Italian instrument sound and making it making the sound like a lot more abstract, a lot more sort of music concrete, a lot more industrial, city sounds, that type of thing. One of my earliest improv projects in this context was my improvisation with balloon artist Judy Dunaway, and I had to sort of integrate my violin so it sort of weaved with the balloon.
And what is she doing with the balloons?
She's rubbing, and she's rubbing, or she has a small piece that she controls letting the air out. So it sounds like something. It produces a sound that's very piercing, So I think in these contexts, I might be playing like I might be playing the Stratus like really high. It really pushes. It results in an in-depth exploration of certain parameters of the instrument.
It's all of us living in a post-Hendrix world where the instrument is a sound producer and a sound processor.
Sure.
And it allows you to get away from violinistic tendencies, perhaps.
Yeah. Then I start thinking. Definitely I'm just thinking in that context, I'm just thinking sound, Yeah. It allows one to abstractify.
Yeah, I was listening with pleasure to one of the pieces you sent me with electronics. Now, I'm curious, is that stuff that's being triggered in real time, or is that overdub? What is that?
There's no overdubbing. That's real time. Yeah. And that was, I think I know what you're talking about. That artist's name is Michael Schumacher, and he's doing a few things, but the main thing he was doing was a modular synthesizer. Yeah. So
that's a duet between violin and
that's a duet between me and him, and he's just he has an assortment of sound producers.
Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff
electronic sound producers.
Well, what sounds what pedals do you use when you're working with electronics?
So that there was a wah-wah, and there was a flanger. Yeah. I do use, let's call these like electronic toys, and I do incorporate them, but I don't do it excessively. I just do it when it makes sense to me, and when it allows me to, I think of it as like another option for me. But I would say I'm much more interested in just thinking about how to expand what I could do on the instrument. And I think in that sense, I come, I probably come more from, let's say, kind of like the John Cage tradition of exploring what one, exploring and expanding the possibility of the instrument. And I think it's really interesting when you're able to produce something from the instrument that nobody thinks you could, like there's like a subtone technique where I literally could make my violin sound like it's doing a duck call. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, there's a whole world of extended techniques for violin and for strings. I've always loved writing for strings, and I always think of the strings as being incredibly varied tone generators, right? So there's a super sweet violin sound that we all know, but if you come up listening to enough improvising violinists and people who were early amplifying violinists, like I mentioned the Hendrix connection, but the whole idea then, of course, non-traditional approaches to the instrument, like grinding with the bow, or using the wood of the bow, or off of the neck. All of these things that can happen. Were you interested in Leroy Jenkins at all as an improvising violinist?
I interfaced with Leroy. Yeah. I wish I spent more time with him, but I know some of his records. Yeah. Very interesting.
I'm just curious if there were other improvising violinists that were some people you checked out.
Yeah, I need to think there definitely are. That said, I think I often draw inspiration from improvisers on other instruments, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I mean, I know this is a totally different style, but like I think Grappelli is amazing. And I mean, I feel like when I hear Grappelli, what I really learned from Grappelli is his sense of time and his sense of feel. And one, like, time and feel is sometimes, time and feel is very often missing in the classical world. And yeah, I mean, never mind, his acrobatics, I mean, it's amazing what he does. But yeah, just the time and feel is just, you learn so much just like focusing on that. Improvising, recently I've gotten into some of the masters of Indian violin playing. The master, I think it's Ron, R-A-N, right? Well, it's, it's a new area of interest for me. Is the amazing Indian type of playing. A contemporary player right now that's awesome is Kala Ramnath. Yeah, and I mean, their way of they have their unique way of going up and down the instrument.
What did you think of Ornette as a violinist?
Oh, I've seen some stuff. It's amazing. Yeah.
I guess people don't. He would take the violin and flip it, right?
It's the other way. Yeah. Actually, on a festival that I and Flux did with him in 2005 at the Walker Art Center, he used my violin, and actually in their set he played the violin quite a lot.
He dug your violin.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's a really funny part of Ornette's musicality because I think more on trumpet he would play traditionally, but when he played violin, it was a sound source.
It was a sound source. Yep.
Yeah. Um,
He's not afraid to like tell the whole audience, "Hey, I'm just experimenting on this."
right.
Yeah.
I wanted to just throw a couple other names at you because I find these guys so interesting and nobody ever talks about them. But did you collaborate with Phil Niblock?
Yes, I actually, yeah. He's one of my favorite people ever on this planet. And by the way, this album I'm working on is on Phil's XI experimental intermediate label. So a big yes. He you know, love his work as both as a video artist and as a musician. And he, you know, I mean, I don't know, probably a lot of your audience would know he has had his place of residence has also been like this incredible, like old school Soho style loft space that he's presented so much interesting music and sound art at. You know,
I played there many times, actually.
Oh, when were you there?
I played there in the '80s and when it was in in New York, and then into the '90s, Experimental Intermediate Foundation.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's all. Yeah, I know. I kind of came into the space in the late '90s. I came like discovered the space in the late '90s. Yeah. Oh, amazing. And it's like it's one of the remaining places from that era with that, you know, with that feel.
It's a loft space. It's, you know, nothing very fancy about it.
Yeah.
But I have very many fond memories of going to concerts there or playing there. John Cage would be in the audience regularly. He would show up.
Oh, wow, amazing. So again, that's a little bit similar to what we were saying about the adventurous jazz musicians is Phil. So it's like Phil, that, you know, Phil and his performance space has created an incredible community of different types of artists. And yeah, so yeah, mixed media. I really I think of it as you know, it feels like a home away from home.
Yeah, and it predates roulette. I mean, it's one of the original spaces, you know.
That's right.
And what is your interest and your output in terms of mixed media and multimedia performance? That's something you're into?
I am into it, but I don't I haven't done anything in the context of large production, you know. Maybe, you know, maybe that's something that will be in the cards in the future, but obviously that's something that would require a lot of thought, you know, to come up with a project proposal, you know, of that sort. But I mean, just on a smaller scale, collaboration context, you know, I often working or playing with people, you know, doing working other media.
You work with dancers?
Yes, we do that. I don't know if you know. Jacobs. Yeah, I don't know if you heard of the filmmaker Ken Jacobs.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so like, you know, I've you know, so I've collaborated with him. that's definitely, mixed media. Yeah, and your last question, yeah, we have done. I myself and the quartet has definitely done a lot of projects with dancers. Of note is, I'd say over the last 6 to 8 years, 6 to 9 years, we've worked with a dancer named Pam Tanowitz, and there have been a few programs, but one program has been the two Nan Carroll quartets, like set to her dance. And most recently, actually, and I don't know, no, you know what? Great music is great music. We're okay with playing things before 1945. So a recent project, also with this choreographer Pam Tanowitz, is Flux playing Bartok's Fifth Quartet.
Number 5?
Number 5, yeah.
Wow.
Performances were sadly, whatever you want to call it, postponed or canceled during the pandemic. But word has it that next February 2022, we're going to do that project with the New York City Ballet.
Wow, that would be great.
Yeah. So yes, we have worked a lot with dance.
So what's in the future for Flux Quartet? Are you guys looking toward the next couple of years with a lot of stuff lined up, or what is your outlook?
We have it's looking like several of the summer festivals, and last year everything was postponed, but it's looking like a lot of them are gonna happen this summer. And then as we go further in the fall, yeah, we have 2 or 3 recording projects with some lesser known living composers. Oh, I should say, we just did this. This was one of the last things we did prior to the pandemic. Was we had a couple concerts in Japan, in the city of Yokohama, Japan, and one of the concerts was all the string quartets by Toshi Ichiyanagi. And that actually, when the concert happened, they pushed the record button, so that has resulted in a live recording of all his string quartets.
How many?
6. So that actually came out like late 2020, and I guess I'll have to find a. I have to if anybody's interested, I have to send you like a link with information, but I have to do a little digging. But that's a recording. That's our most recent output, and it's something we're very proud of.
Ichiyanagi is such an interesting composer.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think a lot of people are familiar with Takemitsu's, but they're not as familiar with Ichiyanagi. But just such fantastically rich.
Do you? But you must know Ichiyanagi's connection with Yoko Ono, right?
I don't think I do, Tom.
He's Yoko Ono's first husband.
Oh.
That he was actually part of Fluxus. And
but she's part of Flux, right?
She was part of Fluxus.
Fluxus, yeah.
And in the early days, he was too, because he was tight with John Cage. I mean, he may have even, I don't know, maybe he was. Anyways, I mean, let's just say his involvement in the Fluxus thing is definitely attributable to John Cage. And yeah, he was Yoko Ono's first husband. There, I gave this. That was my new Wikipedia information I provided today.
Well, I'll take it. I actually didn't put those two things together. Well, Tom, it's been such a lot of fun to speak with you about stuff. Where can people find you on the internet?
Um, fluxquartet.com. Okay. We also have quite a bit of stuff on YouTube. And yeah, this album that I'm working on, hopefully will be out May or June. And you know, I suppose there would be it'll definitely be on the experimental intermedia website. So I think that's experimental-intermedia.org.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to that. Anything from Tom Chiu and the Flux Quartet.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been really fun catching up with you, and just you know just great to talk music, right?
That's why we're here.
I mean, is there anything else better than this?
No, it's definitely gotten me through some months.
Yeah.
You know, being able to chat with people about all their little projects and their interests, and nobody's ever boring. So everybody's got something interesting. And Tom, you know, we've known each other for over 20 years, and I know you're always doing something interesting. So
I was so happy to reconnect with you.
yeah.
When we met each other in Princeton. That was a great moment.
Yeah, it had been a while, and that was really a great concert. And you know, always happy to see your projects out there doing something different. Tom Chiu, thank you so much.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, Greg.
Please continue to follow what we're doing here, like and subscribe, and we'll have more interesting musicians coming up in the future, just like we have in the past. So thanks to everyone out there for listening from me, Gregg Bendian, and the ProgCast. We'll see you next time.
See you.